The power of disruption is rarely a force that announces itself with grand declarations. Instead, it often begins as a quiet murmur in the corners of industries long accustomed to stability, predictability, and comfortable routines. And it is within this quiet that startups, those small, scrappy, resource-strained pioneers, find the space to imagine what incumbents no longer bother to question. Rewriting the rules not through size, but through sheer audacity. Across history, every major industry revolution has carried the fingerprints of entities dismissed at first glance. Companies with too few employees, too little funding, and too unconventional a vision. Yet what they lack in traditional resources, they compensate for with an almost gravitational pull toward experimentation, toward challenging assumptions, and toward embracing risks that established players have learned to fear. When one examines why disruption is so often born from startups, the answer lies in the structural nature of innovation itself. Entrenched corporations spend years constructing layers of procedure, hierarchy, and approval cycles, all of which act like sediment building on a riverbed, slowing the flow of new ideas, while startups, unburdened by legacy constraints, move with a speed and fluidity that becomes lethal to complacency. A startup does not merely create a product, it launches a provocation, a signal that reveals gaps in the market others assumed were closed. And by addressing these gaps with novel business models, design philosophies, or technology stacks, it exposes how fragile the current order truly is. Consider how ride-sharing platforms dismantled century-old taxi systems, how digital payment services redefined banking relationships, or how streaming platforms forced entire entertainment giants to abandon decades of distribution strategy. And in each of these transformations, the pattern is visible. Incumbents respond only after the disruption has already taken root, proving that agility, not size, determines competitive survival. Yet disruption is not solely about technology. It is also about mindset, about the willingness to question deeply held beliefs such as consumers prefer ownership over access, or physical retail will always dominate, or only large institutions can manage financial systems, and once a startup reframes such assumptions, the reframing becomes contagious. Investors, media, customers, and even competitors begin reevaluating possibilities, creating momentum that shifts markets faster than traditional companies can maneuver. What makes startups particularly powerful is their unique relationship with uncertainty. While corporations allocate entire departments to minimize it, startups treat uncertainty as a natural habitat, enabling them to pivot, iterate, discard, and rebuild without the existential anxiety that slows incumbents. This ability to pivot, often romanticized in entrepreneurial folklore, is actually a sophisticated strategic advantage. The recognition that being wrong quickly is more valuable than being slow and correct. Because in fast-moving markets, timing becomes the currency of disruption. In parallel, startups often emerge during moments when technological thresholds become low enough for small teams to wield capabilities once reserved for giants, such as cloud computing, eliminating the need for large infrastructure budgets, AI enabling automated insights previously needing large analyst teams, and global digital distribution, flattening the cost of reaching millions of users. With such leverage, a team of 3 can outperform a corporation of 30,000, not by working harder, but by architecting systems that scale without mirroring corporate inefficiencies, and the result is an asymmetry that upends expectations. What is most fascinating is how consumers subconsciously root for such disruption. They may not explicitly articulate it, but in their frustration with outdated services, opaque pricing, and rigid policies, they quietly crave alternatives. And startups succeed by turning this unspoken dissatisfaction into a movement. This emotional dimension of disruption is often underestimated, yet it fuels virality, user adoption, and loyalty that money alone cannot buy. When users feel that a startup gets them, they do more than make purchases. They evangelize, defend, and participate in the startup's mission. And as customer communities grow, they exert pressure on regulators, legacy firms, and markets to adapt, meaning disruption becomes not just a business phenomenon, but a cultural one. In this cultural shift, startups redefine entire value chains. They shorten supply routes, automate manual processes, remove intermediaries, or introduce data-driven systems that illuminate inefficiencies hidden for decades. Take the example of industries where middlemen extracted disproportionate value simply because no one imagined a more transparent or streamlined alternative. Once a startup shows that such middlemen are unnecessary, the psychological barrier collapses, and consumers no longer accept the previous norm. Yet disruption is never merely external. It transforms the startup as well. With every stage of growth, the organization wrestles with tension between maintaining its original agility and adopting structures required for scale, and this paradox, known as the innovator's dilemma, determines whether the disruptor eventually becomes the disrupted. Companies that once prided themselves on speed may find themselves slowed by the very success they fought to achieve, and only those with deliberate cultural design can preserve the rebellious spirit that fueled their ascent. Interestingly, disruption also challenges societal expectations around employment, skill sets, and the future of work itself. Startups often introduce new roles that did not exist before, changing education curricula, career trajectories, and even personal aspirations. They demonstrate that innovation is not limited to scientific breakthroughs, but can be found in business models, user experience design, community building, and behavioral economics. More importantly, they reveal that industries do not collapse because of disruptors. They collapse because they stopped listening, stopped experimenting, and stopped evolving. Startups simply accelerate the collapse by offering a compelling alternative. They are mirrors that expose the stagnation of incumbents, catalysts that awaken latent demand, and storytellers weaving narratives about what the future could look like if imagination were prioritized over preservation. Ultimately, the power of disruption lies not in technology, but in perspective, the courage to see the world not as it is, but as it could be, to challenge the idea that this is how things have always been done, and to embrace the uncomfortable truth that stability is an illusion, sustained only until someone, somewhere, asks why. And as we explore how startups revolutionize industries, we must understand that disruption is less a sudden explosion and more a gradual shift, accumulating until an entire sector tilts, and it is in this buildup that one finds the true essence of revolution. For every bold innovation begins with a question, and every industry transformation begins with a startup daring to ask it, even when the rest of the world remains silent, allowing the momentum of that question to gather force, until eventually it becomes impossible for any one competitor, regulator, or consumer to ignore, pushing the boundaries of what is considered possible and reshaping the economy in ways so profound that future generations will look back and wonder how we ever accepted the limitations that once seemed so permanent. And in that reflection lies the undeniable truth that the power of disruption is ultimately the power to imagine beyond constraints, to dismantle long-standing assumptions, and to usher in an era where innovation becomes the norm rather than the exception, driven by the restless curiosity of founders who believe that industries are not immovable monoliths, but flexible systems waiting to be reimagined. And this belief forms the foundation upon which revolutions are built, continuing to spread outward as startups evolve, expand, and inspire others to pursue breakthroughs that ripple across markets, gradually weaving together a tapestry of transformation that redefines value, opportunity, and human potential, setting the stage for even greater disruptions yet to emerge as the cycle of innovation turns and new challengers rise to confront the boundaries left behind by previous revolutionaries, moving the world forward with every question they dare to raise, even when the established powers resist, deny, or dismiss the early signals that something fundamental is shifting beneath the surface, causing the first cracks to appear in structures once believed unshakable. Cracks that widen until the entire landscape must inevitably change, forcing every actor within it to confront the new reality that has emerged. And as this inevitability unfolds, the true magnitude of disruption becomes visible in the way incentives shift, alliances dissolve, and entirely new power structures rise from the gaps left behind by incumbents too slow to adapt. In this phase, a startup's influence is no longer measured by its size, but by the gravitational pull it exerts on an industry's direction. Suppliers recalibrate to serve faster, more digital workflows. Regulators rewrite outdated frameworks. Investors redirect capital toward models once considered fringe. And consumers reshape their expectations so radically that the old value propositions lose their relevance. What begins as a small fracture in an established system grows into a continental drift of economic logic, pushing traditional companies into a race they never trained for. Some incumbents attempt to buy innovation through acquisitions, hoping to graft agility onto bureaucratic structures. Yet the contradiction between freedom and control often suffocates the very spark they intended to harness. Others try to imitate startup methods, rapid prototyping, cross-functional squads, lean experimentation, but without the existential pressure that makes such methods effective. Their efforts become little more than corporate theater. Meanwhile, the startups that initiated the disruption evolve into something more formidable. Organizations that not only scale their operations, but refine their philosophies. They begin integrating data loops that anticipate user behavior, building ecosystems instead of products, nurturing communities instead of mere customer bases. Their vision expands from solving a problem to redefining an entire experience. And this shift in ambition is what pushes industries across the threshold of irreversible transformation. Yet with growth comes a paradox. The disruptive startup risks becoming the very institution it once challenged. Processes thicken, decision cycles lengthen, and the hunger that once propelled bold experimentation can erode under the weight of operational complexity. Only the startups that maintain a culture of dissent, where questioning assumptions is celebrated rather than punished, avoid falling into this trap. These companies institutionalize adaptability, embedding in their DNA the idea that reinvention is not an emergency response, but a continuous discipline. In doing so, they create a self-renewing engine capable of weathering the next wave of disruption, even if it comes from a new generation of challengers. This cyclical nature of innovation, where disruptors become leaders and leaders risk becoming obstacles, reveals a deeper truth. Industries are living systems, constantly shaped by the tension between stability and change. Startups function as the catalysts of that evolution, accelerating transitions that might otherwise take decades. Their presence reminds the world that progress is not a straight line, but a series of ruptures, each one an invitation to reconsider what is possible. And perhaps the most profound impact of startups is not the technologies they introduce, but the mindset they normalize. That no industry is finished, that no standard is permanent, that no giant is immortal. They teach society to view constraints as puzzles, inefficiencies as opportunities, and establish norms as temporary suggestions rather than immutable laws. In this sense, the true revolution they unleash is cultural, a shift in collective imagination that empowers individuals, organizations, and even governments to rethink the future with greater boldness. As the dust settles on each wave of disruption, the world emerges more connected, more efficient, and more attuned to human experience, yet also more aware that the next shift is always on the horizon, carried by the curiosity of someone willing to challenge the assumptions the current generation has begun to take for granted. And it is in this endless cycle of questioning, rebuilding, and reimagining that startups continue to revolutionize industries, not as fleeting anomalies, but as the enduring architects of progress, shaping a world that moves ever closer to its unrealized potential. Completed.